She said she needed to explore other options. I just smiled. Her replacement was already beside me. The conversation I'd been dreading for weeks finally happened on a Tuesday night, right after Claire got home from her weekly book club meeting with her recently divorced friends. I was reviewing quarterly reports at the kitchen table when she walked in with that look on her face, the one that meant she'd been rehearsing something dramatic in the car. "Mark, we need to talk," she announced, setting down her designer purse with theatrical precision and positioning herself like she was about to deliver a TED Talk. I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention, the same way I'd done for 8 years of marriage whenever she had something important to discuss. "I've been doing some soul-searching lately," she began, pacing around our living room like she was delivering a presentation to potential investors. "The girls at book club have been sharing their experiences about rediscovering themselves after their divorces, and I realized I never really explored who I am outside of this marriage. I got married so young, Mark. I went straight from my parents' house to our house, and I feel like I missed out on understanding my own identity." I nodded, watching her work up to whatever bombshell she'd clearly prepared and practiced in front of our bedroom mirror. The performance felt oddly familiar, like watching someone recite lines they'd memorized but didn't quite understand. "I think I need to find myself, explore connections with other people who can help me grow in ways I haven't experienced before. There's this trainer at my gym, Nathan, and I feel this incredible energy when we work out together. He challenges me physically and mentally in ways that make me feel alive again." She paused dramatically, clearly expecting shock or anger or desperate pleading, maybe even the jealous rage that would validate her narrative about our stale marriage. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and said calmly, "That sounds like exactly what you should do." Her confident expression faltered completely, like an actress who'd forgotten her next line. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice losing that rehearsed quality and becoming genuinely uncertain. "I mean you should absolutely pursue whatever makes you happy, Claire. Personal growth is important, and if exploring a connection with Nathan helps you understand yourself better, I support that completely. You deserve to feel alive and challenged, and if that's what he provides, then you should embrace it." I watched her face cycle through confusion, disappointment, and something that looked almost like panic. This clearly wasn't the script she'd rehearsed with her divorced book club friends during their weekly sessions of mutual validation. She'd expected tears, arguments, maybe even threats of divorce that would give her the upper hand in whatever negotiation she'd imagined this conversation would become. "You're not going to fight for us?" she asked, her voice smaller now, almost childlike in its vulnerability. "I'm not going to stand in the way of your journey of self-discovery, Claire. I've always believed people should pursue their authentic path, even if that path leads away from me. That's what real love looks like, isn't it? Supporting someone's growth even when it's uncomfortable." The conversation ended with Claire staring at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language, completely off balance and clearly unsure how to proceed with her carefully planned emotional manipulation having backfired so spectacularly that she seemed genuinely lost. Claire began scheduling extra training sessions with Nathan the very next week, posting carefully curated gym selfies on social media with captions about pushing boundaries and discovering new strength. I found myself genuinely amused by her sudden fitness enthusiasm, especially since she'd complained about going to the gym for years before Nathan appeared, claiming it was boring and that she preferred yoga at home. Meanwhile, I started mentioning my evening photography classes with increasing frequency, something I'd enrolled in months ago but had barely discussed at home since Claire usually dominated our dinner conversations with gossip from her book club or complaints about her coworkers. "Nathan says I have natural athletic ability that most people never develop," she announced over dinner one Thursday, showing me a photo of herself doing some elaborate stretching pose that looked more Instagram-ready than functional. "He suggested we do some private nutrition consultations to optimize my performance. He thinks I could really excel if I had the right guidance and support system." I nodded appreciatively while cutting my chicken, genuinely pleased to see her excited about something. "That's great, honey. Isabella mentioned something similar today about optimizing light exposure for different subjects. She says most amateur photographers never learn to read natural lighting properly, but with the right training, you can capture images that tell stories people feel in their bones." Claire's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and I could see her processing this unexpected parallel. "Isabella?" she asked, her voice carrying a note I hadn't heard before. "My photography instructor. She's this incredible former fashion photographer who just got back from documenting wildlife in Costa Rica for a conservation project. She's been teaching me about natural lighting techniques that most people never consider, like how golden hour changes depending on geography and season." I watched Claire's confident expression waver slightly as she absorbed this information. She'd clearly expected me to be sitting at home brooding while she explored her connection with Nathan, not engaging in my own meaningful pursuit with someone who sounded genuinely accomplished and worldly. "Photography class," she repeated slowly, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly become more complex than expected. "You never mentioned being interested in photography before. When did this start?" "Well, you never mentioned being interested in personal training before Nathan either," I replied with a gentle smile, keeping my tone light and conversational. "It's amazing what we discover about ourselves when we're open to new experiences and meet people who inspire us to grow, isn't it? Isabella has this way of seeing beauty in unexpected places that's completely changed how I look at the world around us." Over the following weeks, Claire shared increasingly detailed stories about Nathan's compliments on her form, his suggestions for weekend workout sessions, and his insights about mind-body connection and unlocking her hidden potential. She seemed genuinely frustrated that each revelation was met with my authentic support and enthusiasm rather than the jealousy she was clearly hoping to provoke. I reciprocated by sharing stories about Isabella's fascinating career transitions, her upcoming gallery showing featuring her Costa Rica wildlife series, and the technical skills she was teaching me about composition and storytelling through images. "Isabella thinks I have a natural eye for capturing authentic moments," I mentioned one evening while Claire was scrolling through Nathan's Instagram profile, which seemed to feature mostly shirtless mirror selfies and protein powder advertisements. She suggested I might consider doing some freelance work for her studio once I develop my portfolio more. She's expanding into commercial photography and needs someone with business experience to help strategize the growth. Claire looked up from her phone with something approaching genuine alarm, her thumb frozen mid-scroll. "Freelance work? You mean like working together outside of class? On actual projects?" "Potentially." She mentioned needing someone who understands market analysis and client relations to help expand into commercial photography. Corporate headshots, product photography, that sort of thing. It's probably nothing serious, but it's incredibly flattering that she sees potential in someone who just started learning a few months ago. I watched Claire realize that while she was playing elaborate games designed to make me jealous and prove her desirability, I had somehow stumbled into something that was energizing me in ways our marriage hadn't in years. The parallel explorations were beginning to reveal stark differences in substance and authenticity, and I could see her starting to understand that her carefully orchestrated drama was being overshadowed by something unexpectedly real and meaningful. Claire arranged a weekend getaway with Nathan to go on what she called a wellness retreat in nature, which I later discovered was essentially a day trip to a popular trail about an hour outside the city that featured prominently on Instagram location tags. She spent the entire week leading up to it buying new outdoor gear from premium brands and posting Instagram stories about disconnecting to reconnect with my authentic self and embracing the wild woman within. Meanwhile, I had planned my own weekend expedition with Isabella to capture sunrise shots at the mountain overlook, something she'd suggested would teach me about working with challenging lighting conditions and natural compositions while pushing my technical skills to the next level. "Nathan thinks this trip will be transformative for both of us," Claire announced Friday evening, packing her brand new backpack with items that looked more suited for a fashion photo shoot than actual outdoor activity. "He says being in nature together will deepen our connection and help me understand what I'm really looking for in life. He's planning this whole mindfulness experience where we disconnect from technology and focus on being present with each other and the natural world." I wished her well and genuinely meant it, hoping she'd find whatever clarity she was seeking through this adventure. Saturday morning at 4:30 a.m., Isabella and I left for the mountains in her well-used SUV, driving through winding back roads while she shared stories about her experiences photographing jaguars in the Costa Rican rainforest and the incredible patience required to capture wildlife in their natural habitat without disturbing their behavior patterns. Most people think nature photography is about finding pretty scenes, she explained as we navigated switchback curves in the pre-dawn darkness. But it's really about understanding ecosystems and learning to become invisible so you can document authentic moments. When we reached the summit and I watched the sun paint the valley below in colors I'd never noticed before, I finally understood what she meant about photography being meditation in motion, a way of connecting with the world that transcended mere documentation. Isabella taught me how to read the landscape like a story, to anticipate how light would change throughout the morning hours, and to frame shots that captured not just what we saw but the emotions and energy we felt in those moments. "You have an intuitive understanding of composition that can't be taught," she said as I adjusted my camera settings for a particularly striking rock formation silhouetted against the emerging dawn light. "Most people try too hard to force the perfect shot, but you're learning to let the moment reveal itself naturally. That's the difference between taking pictures and creating art." We spent hours exploring different vantage points around the overlook, and I found myself completely absorbed in the technical and artistic challenges of capturing the essence of what we were experiencing together. Claire returned Sunday evening with a collection of carefully posed selfies and what appeared to be a slightly strained expression that she was trying to hide behind forced enthusiasm. "How was your wellness retreat?" I asked, genuinely curious about her experience and hoping she'd found the meaningful connection she'd been seeking. "It was definitely educational," she replied in a tone that suggested it hadn't gone quite as planned or as she'd expected. "Nathan spent most of the time taking photos of himself for his social media accounts and talking about his follower count and engagement rates. Apparently, he's trying to become a fitness influencer and thought the mountain backdrop would be perfect for his brand aesthetic." I nodded sympathetically while uploading my own photos from the weekend expedition, images that Isabella had helped me capture showing the raw beauty of dawn breaking over ancient stone formations and misty forest valleys. The contrast in our weekend activities was becoming impossible to ignore. He also mentioned that he's launching a new supplement line and wondered if I'd be interested in promoting it on my Instagram for a commission, Claire continued, her voice carrying a note of disappointment and disillusionment I hadn't heard before. I guess I was expecting more focus on actual outdoor exploration and personal growth, but it felt more like a business networking opportunity disguised as spiritual connection. He kept talking about leveraging nature content for his personal brand expansion. I showed her some of the photographs from my mountain expedition, images that captured misty valleys and golden light filtering through ancient pine trees, and her expression shifted dramatically as she realized the stark difference between our weekend experiences and what they revealed about our respective connections. "These are absolutely incredible, Mark. You took these yourself?" she asked, studying the images with what appeared to be genuine surprise and perhaps a hint of something that looked like envy. "Isabella taught me how to see the landscape differently, how to wait for the right moment instead of forcing it," I explained. "She's amazing at reading natural patterns and helping you understand how light tells stories about place and time. She says every location has its own personality that reveals itself if you're patient enough to listen." Claire studied the photos more closely, and I could see her processing the quality gap between Nathan's selfie-focused outdoor adventure and the genuine artistry I'd been learning under Isabella's guidance. "Isabella sounds incredibly talented," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note I couldn't quite identify. "She really is. Tomorrow she's showing me her complete portfolio from the Costa Rica Conservation Project. National Geographic is seriously considering featuring some of her wildlife shots in an upcoming issue about rainforest preservation efforts." The contrast between Nathan's supplement-pushing social media ambitions and Isabella's legitimate artistic achievements seemed to hit Claire like a physical revelation, and I watched her realize that while she'd been playing elaborate games designed to provoke jealousy, I'd somehow stumbled into something with actual substance, meaning, and genuine creative fulfillment. Claire discovered Isabella's photography had been featured in National Geographic when she decided to investigate my photography instructor online, something that became apparent when I found her scrolling through Isabella's professional website at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night. I pretended not to notice her research session, but the next morning she casually mentioned that she'd looked up Isabella out of curiosity and seemed genuinely shaken by what she'd found. Isabella's portfolio showcased exhibitions in major cities like New York, San Francisco, and Miami, with prestigious awards from the International Photography Association and recognition from conservation organizations for her environmental documentary work. Her studio downtown wasn't just a local photography business. It was a respected artistic enterprise that regularly collaborated with museums, galleries, and international publications on projects that actually mattered to the global community. "I had no idea Isabella was so accomplished," Claire said over breakfast, her voice carrying a mixture of surprise and what sounded suspiciously like anxiety. "Her website shows work from all over the world, and some of those awards are really impressive. She's not just a photography teacher, is she?" I explained that Isabella had only started teaching recently as a way to give back to the artistic community while building her new studio location, and that most of her time was spent on high-level commercial and conservation projects that took her to remote locations around the globe. Meanwhile, Claire's gym trainer Nathan had reached out to her with a business proposition that revealed the true nature of his interest in their connection. He asked her to promote his new protein powder line on her social media accounts for a commission structure that would give her a small percentage of sales while he kept the majority of profits. "Nathan wants me to become part of his brand ambassador program," she announced, though her enthusiasm seemed forced and brittle. "He thinks my lifestyle aesthetic would be perfect for marketing his supplements to women who want to achieve their fitness goals." The contrast between Nathan's shallow opportunism and Isabella's accomplished artistry was becoming impossible for Claire to ignore, especially when she realized that Nathan saw her primarily as a marketing channel rather than a romantic interest. When I mentioned that Isabella had offered me a junior partnership in her new studio venture, Claire's reaction was immediate and intense. "A partnership? What kind of partnership exactly?" she asked, setting down her coffee cup with enough force to make it rattle against the saucer. I explained that Isabella valued my business background and vision for expanding her studio into commercial photography, something that could potentially provide corporate headshots, product photography, and event coverage for local businesses while maintaining her artistic integrity. "She thinks my analytical skills and understanding of market dynamics could help her scale the business without compromising the quality that's made her reputation," I said, genuinely excited about the possibility of combining creative work with strategic planning. "It's still just a conversation, but the idea of being involved in something meaningful and creative is incredibly appealing." Claire's face went through a series of expressions that I'd never seen before, cycling from disbelief to panic to something that looked almost like fear. "You're talking about changing careers? Leaving your stable job for photography?" "Not immediately, but maybe eventually. Isabella thinks there's real potential for growth, and I've discovered I have a genuine passion for this work that I never expected." I watched Claire process this information while her own exploration with Nathan was revealing itself to be nothing more than a shallow attempt to use her appearance for his business ventures. The realization that she was being treated as a marketing tool while I was being offered genuine partnership and creative opportunities seemed to fundamentally shift her understanding of our parallel journeys. "I think I might have misjudged what Nathan was offering," she said quietly, staring at her phone where his latest message about supplement promotion was still visible. "I thought he saw potential in me as a person, but I'm starting to realize he just sees potential in me as a customer base." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. While she'd been seeking validation through someone who viewed her as a business opportunity, I'd found someone who genuinely appreciated my talents and offered real partnership in meaningful work that could transform my entire career trajectory. Claire attempted to end her training sessions with Nathan the following week, claiming she wanted to refocus on our marriage and put our relationship first. But when she called to cancel their upcoming sessions, he immediately shifted into pure sales mode and tried to convince her to at least continue promoting his supplement line since she'd already built a social media following interested in her fitness journey. "He didn't even seem disappointed that I was ending the training," she told me that evening, her voice carrying a hurt that she was trying desperately to hide behind casual indifference. He just pivoted straight into talking about maintaining our business relationship and how I could still be valuable to his brand expansion even without the personal training component. He said my lifestyle aesthetic was too valuable to his marketing strategy to just walk away from. The conversation had apparently lasted 45 minutes, with Nathan explaining his commission structure, discussing posting schedules, and outlining content creation expectations that would have essentially turned Claire into an unpaid intern for his social media empire. Meanwhile, I had to tell her that I wouldn't be able to reduce my involvement with Isabella or step back from the photography work, because she just presented me with an opportunity that could fundamentally change my entire professional trajectory. Isabella wants me to become a junior partner in her new studio venture, I explained over dinner at our kitchen table, watching Claire's face carefully as I shared this significant development. She's expanding her business into commercial photography and needs someone with strong business experience to help manage client relationships, develop strategic growth plans, and handle the financial aspects of scaling the operation. It's a real opportunity to build something meaningful from the ground up while combining creative work with strategic planning. Claire set down her fork with deliberate precision and stared at me with an expression that cycled through surprise, disbelief, and what appeared to be genuine fear. So you're choosing her over working on our marriage? After 8 years together, you're willing to throw away everything we've built for some photography partnership. I'm choosing an opportunity that could define the rest of my career and provide fulfillment I never knew was possible, I replied, keeping my voice steady and reasonable. This isn't about choosing anyone over anything. It's about recognizing when something extraordinary presents itself and having the courage to pursue it rather than settling for mediocrity out of fear. She accused me of having an emotional affair, which struck me as profoundly hypocritical given everything that had transpired with Nathan over the past several months of her deliberate exploration. You're spending more time with Isabella than you spend with me, she said, her voice rising with frustration and what sounded increasingly like desperation. You talk about her constantly, you get excited when you tell me about your photography sessions, you're planning a business future with her, and now you're telling me you won't step back from this relationship even when I'm asking you to prioritize our marriage and work on what we have together. I pointed out the obvious irony in her accusation, calmly reminding her that she'd been the one who initiated this entire exploration phase of our marriage and had spent weeks talking enthusiastically about Nathan, planning weekend activities with Nathan, and essentially building an intimate relationship with another person while I supported her journey of self-discovery without complaint or jealousy. The difference is that I wasn't trying to make you jealous or test your commitment to me, I said, maintaining my composure despite her increasingly emotional accusations. I was genuinely pursuing something that interests me intellectually and creatively, working with someone who values what I bring to the table and sees potential in me that extends far beyond my current circumstances. Claire's attempts at reconciliation became increasingly desperate and frantic as she realized that her carefully orchestrated strategy had backfired in ways she'd never anticipated or planned for. She offered to stop seeing Nathan completely, to delete his contact information from her phone, to block him on all social media platforms, and to focus entirely on rebuilding our marriage and rediscovering what had originally brought us together. But I explained that the fundamental damage wasn't really about Nathan specifically, it was about the manipulative approach she'd taken to our entire relationship. You treated our marriage like a strategic game where you could create artificial drama to test my reactions and prove your own desirability, I said, trying to help her understand why her desperate offers felt hollow and reactive rather than authentic. Isabella doesn't play games or create unnecessary drama. She communicates directly about her needs and expectations, values genuine collaboration over manufactured conflict, and approaches relationships with honesty and authenticity. That's not something you can compete with by simply changing your behavior temporarily when you realize you're losing control. The revelation that Isabella genuinely appreciated my business background and saw real potential in partnering with me professionally seemed to highlight everything that had been missing in my marriage with Claire for years. Isabella sees possibilities in me that you've never acknowledged or even seemed to notice, I continued, feeling the weight of this truth as I spoke it aloud. She values my analytical skills, actively seeks my opinions about business strategy and creative direction, and treats me like an equal partner in decision-making processes. When was the last time you asked for my input on something important in your life, or showed genuine interest in my professional development and career aspirations, or made me feel like my contributions and perspectives actually mattered to you? Claire promised desperately that she would change completely, that she would become more supportive and appreciative of who I was, that she would stop taking me for granted and start treating me with the respect and recognition I deserved as her partner. But her promises felt entirely reactive rather than authentic, responses to losing something she'd assumed would always be available rather than genuine recognition of my actual value. You're promising to change because you're losing control of the situation and you're panicking, I observed with a clarity that surprised even me. Isabella didn't have to promise to value me or make dramatic declarations about appreciating my worth. She just does, naturally and consistently, because that's who she is and how she approaches relationships. That's the difference between someone who sees your worth immediately and someone who only recognizes it when it's being threatened or taken away. The conversation ended with me explaining that I had learned the profound difference between authentic connection and manipulative testing, and that I was no longer willing to participate in relationships that required me to constantly prove my worth through manufactured drama rather than being appreciated and valued for who I actually was as a person. Claire moved out temporarily the following week, staying with her book club friends who had originally encouraged her exploration and were now offering her their guest rooms while she figured out her next steps. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same divorced women who had convinced her that she needed to test our marriage were now housing her after that strategy had completely backfired in the most spectacular way possible. I think we both need some space to figure out what we really want, she announced while packing her bags with shaking hands, though her voice carried none of the confidence she'd displayed when this whole situation began months earlier. Maybe some time apart will help us both gain perspective on what we're willing to fight for and what really matters in our relationship. I helped her carry boxes to her car, maintaining the same supportive and caring demeanor I'd shown throughout her entire journey of self-discovery, which seemed to frustrate her more than anger or jealousy would have. She kept glancing at me as if waiting for me to break down and beg her to stay, but that moment never came. 2 weeks later, she called my phone 3 times before I answered, and asked in a voice that sounded smaller and more vulnerable than I'd heard in years if we could meet for coffee to discuss our marriage and where we wanted to go from here. I agreed, genuinely curious about what she hoped to accomplish with this conversation, and we met at the same cafe where we'd had our first date 8 years earlier, a choice that felt deliberately symbolic and emotionally manipulative on her part. I've been doing a lot of thinking and soul-searching, she began, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup like it might provide some kind of stability or comfort. I realize now that I made some terrible, terrible mistakes. I got completely caught up in what my friends were saying about marriage being a trap and about needing to explore other options before it was too late. I should never have listened to them instead of trusting what we had built together. She begged me desperately to reconsider and work on our marriage, promising with tears in her eyes that she now understood what she'd almost thrown away and was ready to be the supportive, appreciative partner I had always deserved. I know I took you for granted, Mark. I see that so clearly now. You were stable and reliable and supportive, and I started thinking that meant boring and predictable, but watching you with Isabella has made me realize that stability isn't the opposite of excitement. It's actually the foundation that makes real growth and adventure possible. Her words sounded carefully rehearsed, like she'd practiced this entire speech multiple times in front of a mirror, and I could hear the obvious influence of whatever self-help books or relationship articles her divorced friends had recommended to help her win me back from what they probably saw as a midlife crisis. But I explained patiently that the fundamental issue went much deeper than her temporary fascination with Nathan or even the manipulative testing behavior she'd engaged in over the past several months. The problem isn't just what happened with Nathan, I said, keeping my voice gentle but absolutely firm in my resolve. It's that you approached our entire marriage as something that needed to be constantly evaluated and tested rather than nurtured and appreciated for what it was. Isabella has shown me what it feels like to be genuinely valued for my actual contributions rather than constantly tested for my reactions to manufactured drama and artificial crises. I detailed how Isabella challenged me intellectually and professionally in ways that made me feel energized, purposeful, and genuinely excited about the future, while Claire's approach throughout our relationship had consistently been to create problems and then demand that I solve them to prove my love and commitment to her satisfaction. Isabella sees potential in me and actively works to help me develop and realize it. She asks thoughtful, probing questions about my ideas, builds constructively on my suggestions, and treats our collaboration as a genuine partnership between equals. When was the last time you approached our relationship with that kind of mutual respect and intellectual curiosity? Claire promised desperately and frantically to change everything about how she approached our relationship, insisting that she could become more supportive and intellectually engaging, that she could learn to appreciate me properly and stop taking me for granted. But I pointed out that this pattern of testing and emotional manipulation had defined not just the past few months but essentially our entire 8-year relationship history if I was being completely honest about it. Remember when you'd deliberately flirt with other guys at parties to see if I'd get jealous and possessive? Or when you'd make plans with your friends without telling me, then get upset and accusatory if I made my own plans for the same evening? Or how you'd consistently bring up problems in our relationship right before important work presentations to see if I'd prioritize you over my career advancement? I watched her face carefully as she slowly recognized the pervasive pattern I was describing: years and years of manufactured tests and artificial drama designed to make me constantly prove my commitment rather than simply appreciating and building on the solid foundation we had created together. Isabella represents true partnership and mutual growth. While our marriage had gradually become an endless series of tests I was constantly required to take and retake to prove my worthiness. I'm exhausted from being examined and evaluated, Claire. I want to be appreciated and valued for who I actually am. The conversation ended with me making the conscious choice of growth and authenticity over familiarity and false security, explaining that Isabella represented not just romantic possibility but genuine professional opportunity and personal development that I had never experienced before in any relationship. You actually taught me something incredibly valuable about myself, I said as we prepared to leave the cafe for what I knew would be the last time as a married couple. I learned that I don't have to settle for relationships where I'm constantly proving my worth and jumping through hoops to earn basic respect. Isabella showed me what it feels like to be with someone who sees my value immediately and works actively to amplify it rather than test it at every opportunity. Claire sat quietly for a long, heavy moment, staring into her empty coffee cup like it might contain answers to questions she was afraid to ask out loud. So this is really over? 8 years of marriage, and you're just walking away from everything we built together? I'm not walking away from 8 years, I replied with a certainty that surprised even me. I'm walking towards something infinitely better and more fulfilling. You gave me explicit permission to explore other options, remember? You encouraged me to find myself and discover what I really wanted. I found something extraordinary, and I'm choosing to pursue it with everything I have. 8 months later, Isabella and I were featured on the cover of the local arts magazine after our photography studio won a major commercial contract with the city's largest hotel chain, providing all their marketing photography and event documentation. The article described our business as a perfect blend of artistic vision and strategic planning, and highlighted how our partnership had revolutionized local commercial photography standards. Isabella's wildlife conservation work had indeed been featured in National Geographic, and the recognition had brought high-profile clients to our studio from across the region. I found myself genuinely fulfilled in ways I'd never imagined possible, combining my business background with creative work that felt meaningful and impactful. The day the magazine hit newsstands, Isabella and I announced our engagement in the same publication, with a photo of us working together in our studio, her adjusting lighting while I reviewed client portfolios, both of us completely absorbed in the collaborative process that had become the foundation of both our professional and personal relationship. Meanwhile, Claire had reconciled with Nathan after his supplement line failed, and he'd moved on to promoting them both as a fitness power couple in his social media marketing materials. According to mutual friends, she was working as his unpaid social media manager while he pursued his influencer dreams, essentially doing all the content creation and business development work while he took credit and collected whatever modest revenue their combined followings generated. I genuinely felt no satisfaction in hearing about her struggles, only a distant sadness that she'd never learned to value authentic partnership over manufactured drama. When I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that Claire's need to explore other options had inadvertently led me to discover my true potential with someone who saw my value immediately rather than constantly testing it through artificial scenarios designed to prove my commitment and devotion. As I drove home that afternoon through familiar streets that somehow looked completely different, I felt a profound sense of clarity and inner peace that had been missing from my life for years. The guilt and uncertainty I'd expected to feel about ending my marriage were completely absent, replaced by genuine excitement about the future I was building with someone who truly valued partnership over power games and authenticity over manipulation.